This is Leslie, thinking upwards. You know, right thinking about God leads to right living. In this episode, Alice, Meryl, and Aileen join me as we talk about how God uses marriage to sanctify us and help us grow in greater Christlikeness through this one flesh union. What was one of the first things you liked about your husband when you guys started dating?
So Ray has always been a very quiet person because we met at work. So, and he always struck me
Oh,
as someone that he's very quiet in the big group of people. I mean, you don't take notice of him and you just feel like he didn't even exist. It's that kind of chill. But most of all, I think that really struck me is that his heart for people. He might not show it very much, when you see him around, but he really cares for the elderly, especially the people that in my family. Because when he first met my family, one thing that he really impressed my parents was that he would actually serve them tea because we went to dim sum.
in the very beginning, we kind of just met as mutual friends and we had, formed our relationship by online chatting through the G-Chat. I just didn't expect him to move so fast. Like, fast in the sense that when I was wondering if this guy was interested in me, then he asked me on a date. So I didn't have to wait for him. I think the quality that I recognized then was like leadership, because I felt like when he knew he was interested, he didn't want to play any games. He just made a decision and committed to it. And it involved risk. Like I could have said no
Mhm.
that early on. Like we didn't even go to the same church yet. He wasn't at FCBC yet.
All of us really value like faithfulness and like commitment. And I think that's something that I really value in Hallie. Like, yeah, maybe he's not like super romantic, but when it comes down to it, if there's something that needs to be addressed or if there's something that we need to strive forward to, like he's committed to do it, and
Mm.
like yeah, he'll even say all the time, like, yeah, I know I'm not going to be perfect, but like I'm going to try really
Mm.
hard. And I believe
Mm.
him, that he does
Mhm.
try really hard. And yeah, maybe a couple months down the line it's going to be the same fight and the same conversation again, and then he'll say it again, but at least he's trying.
When Meryl and Hanley were dating, I remember one time in our young adult fellowship group, for whatever reason, Hanley was there and he was in tears because he felt so broken by his pursuing Meryl. And he was telling us, if I tell Meryl if I could be a lifelong student of her, that is
Mm.
hardest.
Wow.
He's so committed.
See, before dating, I appreciated that Mike was really funny. And then when we started,
He is really funny.
Quite
Yeah.
funny, unexpectedly funny.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, once we started dating, what I appreciated the most was like his servant-hearted nature and humility, because he used to like go around collecting everyone's recycled goods to like raise funds for our missionary family at our church. Yeah, he would like cut up fruits and like deliver it to my apartment. I remember just feeling very cared for, and like the only person who I felt cared for in that way before was like my mom. Like really,
Wow. What a compliment.
I know, yeah, like very nurturing and thoughtful.
What did God intend when he talked about this mystery of oneness and unity between a husband and a wife?
Think about like in Genesis where marriage first started, and when in the Bible where it says like, and the two shall become one flesh, and then it says like, and they were with each other and they were naked and they were not ashamed, and I think that's like the picture of oneness, not just like, okay, like physically being one, but I think like being able to look at each other like without shame and in a safe like environment. So yes, God instituted marriage to be the place where man and woman are physically one, but that physical oneness is not possible without like emotional oneness or
Mm.
any other type of oneness, right? Like if there's a barrier between you and your husband, or if you're not connecting, or if you're not spending time with each other, if there's no relationship, then there's not going to be any physical oneness. So I think just that concept of being able to be that close to someone and to be open and vulnerable and feel safe and protected, I think is the like what God intended our relationship to be like. Of course, that was pre-fall. So after a fall, then of course there's that barrier of sin, you know.
I think that whole aspect of vulnerability, like how do you trust your entire being to another person? I think naturally have trust issues.
I think that when Meryl talk about the oneness, I love how you talk about you cannot have the complete oneness or even physical oneness without emotional or spiritual oneness. And to Ephesians 5, 22 to 32 or 33, is to talk about the roles of husband and wife. And I love how God used the image, like how Jesus, how Christ loves the church, just as how the husband will love his wife and give himself up for her. But at the same time, the wife has to be in the right place to accept that sacrifice, that love completely from her husband. It's just just as the church has to obey and follow Jesus the same way. So I do see that that oneness is really something that I don't think we as sinners can really accomplish. Well, as Meryl said, that's after the fall, the sin entered this world, that we cannot accomplish that except when we both, as a husband and wife, really look to Christ at the same time, individually pursuing Christ as well as pursuing Christ together in unity in our marriage.
Yeah, the whole aspect of unity like comes from God, just even in his own essence, the unity or of the Trinity, how they all operate as one. And also the picture of the body of Christ. It talks about us being one, many parts, many members, but one body.
Right.
And in a marriage, like it's another example of oneness between a husband and a wife. And outside of these contexts, you won't understand like the nature of the essence of God's unity. And I think when you just look at the world, like what do you see? Brokenness, and you see just people who don't know the blessing of being unified. There's sin, there's consequences, they don't know how to reconcile. And
like marriage gives us a horizontal picture of the covenant that we vertically have with God. And it makes me think about, like, in the Bible, language is used like how Christ is the bridegroom. We, the church, are the bride. Like Revelations talks about how we're preparing for a wedding to Jesus. God gives us marriage as a wonderful way to put into flesh what that covenant relationship looks like. And to echo what I think Meryl said earlier, like, of course, we don't live this out perfectly because of the fall. And so it's very tainted. But even in the way that we sin against one another in our marriages, the way that we can extend forgiveness and receive one another just paints back to how God forgave us. Like Hosea, God gives us an example of taking in like a sinful bride. Not that like our spouses are like doing any particular type of sin, but we sin against each other all the time, and we get those opportunities to extend that horizontal grace that we've been given vertically. So I think it's like so helpful, because if I didn't have an example of marriage, it'd be harder to understand that because it's so tangible.
Aileen, when you talk about forgiveness, I think that just another way for me to see, like, in marriage, we are just so in need of that forgiveness, and like you said, we constantly sin against each other, because we are two sinners that by God's grace that we can be together. We decided to come together to pursue marriage and to really experience God's grace every single day and his
Yeah.
forgiveness. I feel like, well, we've been married for so long, then how come he still doesn't get it? And then, but when I think about it, it's like, well, he might think the same thing about me. We've been
Yeah.
married for so long. How come she doesn't get it? It's like, so this blaming game could go on and on and on, so when's gonna stop? And then, but like you're saying, God take that proactive step to reach down to us, reach out to us, so that we can have, his grace, and his grace, his redemption, can accomplish so many things that sin destroys.
In marriages that are not Christ-centered, their marriage is not built on grace. It's built on fairness. It's built on individualism. It's built on a little bit more like I-centered. Like let's split everything in half, and they're still reserving things that they don't know if they can fully entrust to their spouse, or they're just two people living in the same household doing completely separate things, seeing the example of my parents. Everything was a shared bank account. There was no such language as my money, your money. And I think that's a very tangible example of oneness, because finances is a very touchy topic. Most people don't like it when you tell them how to spend your money. And so I think like that's a tangible example of something that we actively said, we're gonna demonstrate oneness by sharing a bank account, and there's not gonna be this idea that I need to reserve some for myself.
There are like non-Christians who have like really good marriages, like even better than people who would be like professing believers.
Christians, yeah.
And I was just thinking like, I don't know. It made me really think, right? Like, because people are always in Christian circles are always talking about how like, oh, the husband is supposed to be a leader and the wife is supposed to submit. And this is painting like this perfect picture of like a good marriage. But I was like, that's not true necessarily if like non-believers could have these really good marriages where they could be so faithful for like 80 years or whatever, and they would say like, yeah, my husband is really loving. He's really sacrificial. The goal is not to have like a perfect marriage. Like the goal is ultimately like God's sanctification in us. And I was just thinking like, man, I think I really need to be married because I need to be more sanctified. I was like, I don't think I'd be able to be sanctified without marriage and without motherhood. Oh, that makes it so much harder for someone who's not a believer, who is blessed like by the God's common grace of having like a wonderful to like see the need for Jesus, because it's like, well, like look at all these other Christians who have messed up marriages. Like, why would I want to subject my life to like this Jesus that they're talking about?
What are some things that you have had to sacrifice as an act of love for your husband?
The one that comes to mind in terms of sacrifice is like me time. Like when I get home from work, wanting to spend it on like just recharging myself or doing whatever I wanted to do. When I came home from work and Mike needed help with different things, I started growing like resentment or frustration or impatience at him. And I felt like I deserved like time to recover or time to rest.
You think you're a saint until you get married, and then you realize like how much selfishness was in your heart.
True. That's how I feel.
I thought you were saying that everyone is sane until you get married.
Oh, saint.
Oh, I should say,
like a
sorry.
saint.
I should say everyone is sane until you have kids. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's a more accurate statement right there.
And it made me think about all the training that my mom gave me, and how, a lot of our time was spent in the kitchen together. We would she'd teach me how to make some meals. All of that came in handy when I had to do it all by myself every single day. And it's like, wow, food doesn't just come onto the table. Like, you got to have a shopping list. You got to go shopping. You got to fill the fridge. You got to cook it, clean the dishes, and cycle through that so that there's food on the table. It was really shocking for me, like how much work I had to put in just to feed the two people now. That's a lot of people to feed. So yeah, I
But
feel
now
like
you're
that
feeding 5.
I have been promoted. Yes. You guys know Alice is a good cook, right? Good
Yeah, I
food.
feel like it's always like really like good and you feel like healthy. Like
Oh,
it tastes good and you feel good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your family looks very healthy and well nourished.
oh my. I have two like growing boys at home. It's like, oh my gosh, I just feel like I totally feel you. Like Les, it's like every time I will go grocery shopping, my refrigerator was full, right? And then towards the
Yeah.
end of the week, everything just like, what happened? Everything's empty. There's nothing in the refrigerator. I was like, what happened here?
Do you guys still go through how many gallons of milk a
Oh my
week?
gosh, at least like 4. Yeah, 4 gallons of milk a week.
In a week?
In a week with 2 boys. I mean, it's crazy.
You know what I learned after I got married was that marriages will no longer be when we go to heaven.
Mm.
We're going to get something even better
Sure.
than marriage, which marriage is supposed to be a foreshadow of, which is the perfect unity with Christ and his bride. So we will all be exponentially more united than a husband and wife can be on earth.
Thanks for saying that and pointing our eyes heavenward, because I think it's easy for me to just think about marriage here on earth. Our spouse's greatest need is not each other, it's Christ.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think like my temptation probably would be to try to find like fulfillment just in this earthly marriage and to not look to Christ. So that was really encouraging.
Marriage is the doing of God for the glory of God. Marriage does not complete a person, but true completion is found in Christ. Join us next time on the Walnut Women podcast. Thanks for listening.
But that was when he was humbled because he was trying to win your heart.
I think, yeah, I was just not having it.
But that was so sweet, though. I mean, he wants to be the learner about you for the rest of his life, and
I
then
think he
that's
had to be, otherwise we wouldn't have made it.
yeah. But I
Like
just
if he
you know
wasn't
what?
so persistent, we wouldn't have made it.
When I talked to Ray, I wouldn't I don't lecture him, but he would just tell me, so you know what though? I think you can just make it more concise. Concise? I was just like, what are you trying to tell me? So you know why you're saying like 10 sentences, what you actually mean is in 2 sentences. You can just do that in 2 sentences. Actually, I want to emphasize my point. Before, when I say something, he will start giving me all the solutions. I think I shared this in our younger group too. Then something I would tell him, you know what? I don't really need you to give me solution. I don't want you to be a problem solver. I just want you to be a listening ear.
Yeah.
So now, like when I talk, and he would just like listen, and he would not say a word. I would just like, but are you engaging with me? Are you understanding what I'm saying? He said, yeah. I said, but he's like, well, but I won't say a word until you ask me.
Thank you, Haley.
Who's their husband? Do you know their husbands? Yeah, you do. You don't know any of their husbands?
No.
Who's Auntie Leslie married to? Who's that? Who's that? You know who that is?
Until night.
Uncle Mike.
Oh.
He's gonna be so happy you remembered him.